And welcome back. As was previously covered, the pandemic has had a profound effect on UK society. In fact, it's had an even bigger effect on the healthcare industry, as we've started to uncover. And I think now the disruption of COVID has started to fall away. This is a great opportunity to really step back as an industry and reflect. Are we still meeting the needs of our customers? And I think it's clear that customers' needs are changing. It's no longer good enough merely to just make sure that you're paying for claims for onward treatment. What's really important, are we meeting those needs? And I think if there's one positive thing that's come out of COVID, it's that customers have made that link between their lifestyle choices and their health risks. So we have to help them with that challenge. I think secondly, as we've talked a little bit in the previous session, the demand for primary care has grown significantly. Again, the industry needs to step up and support that. And I think finally, the industry needs to do something about digitalisation. Customers are interacting with their financial services products, in fact, all products, in a digital way, and they expect that of us, and we need to make sure that we're stepping up and doing that. As I say, this is about reflecting, and we've taken the opportunity to look back at 2021, using our claims data and sharing that with the industry and sharing our insights, and really looking at some of those key trends that we can see and think about how do we, as insurers, as advisors, step up to meet that challenge. So I'll be covering a number of different areas. Firstly, around prevention. So historically, we've talked about prevention in the guise of physical health and perhaps nutrition and the impact on health outcomes. But now we're starting to really think about screening and early intervention, I guess what we're calling prevention 2.0. And my colleague Keith will be talking much more about that later on. Secondly, we need to think about primary care and the demands that it has on us and the usage, whether it's the Vitality GP, whether it's talking therapies or physio. How do we meet that demand? Cancer remains an area that's significantly important for many customers, and there has been significant improvements and changes in the technology, and we need to reflect and think about that. I think mental health is an area that I think personally is very important. One of the things that I think is a positive outcome from COVID is that finally, as a society, we are treating the mental health as important as we are our physical health. And I think that is so important and something we need to continually be thinking about. Talking about physical health, physio, I think as was just mentioned, again, is under high demand and is something that we need to think about. And then the big trend that we've seen is that focus towards directional care. And we need to look at and understand why that's happening and how does that suit customers' needs better. So let's look at some of those points and really start to unpack them. So let's think about preventative care first. So when we've thought about preventative care in the past, we've always understood, or finally we've understood, should I say, that there is a link between physical health, nutrition, and better health outcomes. I think which is probably less well understood is the disease burden and the fact that nearly 43% of all disease burden is actually avoidable. And 88% of that are down to lifestyle choices that we make. So lifestyle really can make a massive difference. So if we just turn to my first graph, what you can see here is the link between vitality engagement, so the usage of our vitality program, and claims costs. And what you can see is that the highly engaged customers can save or have saved up to 40% of their healthcare costs. And obviously, healthcare costs are directly related to their experience of treatment and recovery. But I think the trend that's much more significant in this graph is that just look at even the lowest levels of engagement, you're seeing a 20% reduction here in healthcare costs. So when we talk about small change makes a big difference, I hope if nothing else, this single graph can articulate and make that point really powerfully. But if we move on, the problem is these things are hard to do. We all know we should be walking 10,000 steps a day. We should be eating 5 pieces of fruit and vegetable a day. But the fact is, we don't do those things. We need to be incentivized and we need to be motivated. And that's where behavioral economics comes in. If we look at our customers that use the Apple Watch, we can see they're 34% more engaged in the program. Likewise, with our Waitrose customers who have linked their Vitality account, we see that they buy 65% more healthy foods. So you can see that behavioural economics is an important mechanism for changing behaviour. I think the other thing that's important is that what we've learned is it's small benefits that are easily attainable over a short period of time that actually have the biggest impact. So when we, a number of years, launched our coffee benefit linked to activity, a number of our competitors were questioning, indeed mocking, what has coffee got to do with health insurance? And I think we've successfully proved over that period of time that actually it has a lot to do with health and well-being, and therefore in turn the customer's likelihood to claim. But we talk a lot about prevention, but of course lifestyle choices can also make a difference when it comes to thinking about your speed of recovery following an illness, because the simple fact is, regardless of how much activity you do, there is still a chance that you will become ill. And if we delve into our data from South Africa, where they cover all the health costs, so if you imagine it's very similar to an American marketplace where all costs are covered by the insurer, that gives you a really good perspective of the impact. And what we've seen is significantly better health outcomes for customers that go into treatment. So from early diagnostics to quicker recovery times as a result of their level of engagement. In fact, what we're seeing is numbers for cancer, for example, up to 53% better outcomes, and for prostate, 53, sorry, for prostate, and high 40s for cancer. So preventative care, really, really important. One of the trends that Steve was talking about is the rise of primary care. And you know, the NHS is under significant pressure to deliver that, and insurers have increasingly stepped up to try and fill that demand. If you look at the next graph I'm showing you, that gives you an indication of the number of claims, or the percentage of claims that relate to primary care. And as you can see here, nearly 40% of our claims in 2021 were driven by primary care claims. You can see that growth in GP access, significant demand has been driven there, but also you can see the increase in talking therapies, but also physical physio usage as well. So you've gone from a 10% to an over 40% share of claims across our whole book, so really, really significant. And I guess the question is, what has driven this? And if you go on to the next slide, what you can basically see, the answer is digital. By digitalising a lot of these services, we've been able to make it much more accessible and much easier to more of our customers. So just unpacking some of those numbers there. 100,000 virtual consultations, significant growth in that area in particular. 80% of that, 80% of our talking therapies are done on a digital basis, and many of our physio sessions start with a digital triage. So really making a big difference. Care Hub is our digital access to claims, and you can see that we're having 35,000 members use that service every single month. Around half of those customers are using it to start a claim for the first time. The other half are using it to perhaps check their outpatient, look at their excess, or check where their claim is going. The reality is not everyone is going to use a digital service, and our call centres will always remain there for those customers that prefer to speak to a human. But what we're seeing is more and more customers wanting to claim and interact with us in a digital process. And again, as Steve covered, that's something that as an insurer we need to be alive to. We need to continually challenge ourselves to look at new ways of talking to our customers. When we think about the next key topic, and you ask a customer what is the number one important benefit in relation to private medical insurance, they will answer cancer cover. And that's the next topic that I'd like to really delve into. Why is it so important for customers? Well, significantly, it's an area that obviously has a lot of press, and it's an area that's had a lot of advance in terms of technology, in terms of drugs, in terms of treatment. There are lots of examples we could use, and the example that I'd like to use is chemotherapy. So if you look at this graph here on the screen, what this is showing you is the rate of increase of the different types of treatments, and you can see the advanced types of treatments, so hormone, biphosphonate and biological, are growing much, much faster than the traditional other types of treatments that exist. I think there are a couple of other things that we've seen happen as well. There's been a significant shift to customers requesting to have their chemotherapy treatment done at home. In fact, 40% up from 2019. And that hasn't dropped back. So as COVID has started to unwind, we've seen customers stay at that level, and it's understandable. It's convenient, and it's much more easier for members to recover from the chemotherapy in their home rather than having to go to hospital, wait and recover. I think the thing that stood out for me when I looked at this data was that 1 in 4 of claims are below the ages of 50, which I think it is a scary stat, if nothing else. One of the ways we always find it's helpful to pull these examples together is by using a case study. So if we can sort of move on to the next area I'd like to look at, and that's really just exploring one of the case studies that is in our Insights report. This relates to a lady called Georgie. She, at the age of 29, unfortunately contracted breast cancer. She had her treatment, and as part of her chemo, she chose to have the chemotherapy done at home. For her, it suited her. It helped her, give her the flexibility, the convenience to have treatment at a time that suited her. She was competing in various different horse-related activities, so it gave her that flexibility to do that. And I think that was really important. But equally, what was important to her, that her PMI plan allowed her to have some gene testing, and unfortunately, she found she had the CHEK2 gene. Now, that means there's a 40% chance of reoccurrence. But armed with that information, she's able to make decisions about further preventative care at a time that's right for her based on the guidance of her consultant. And I hope that what that does is demonstrates the value that private medical insurance can offer. Moving on to, I guess, reviewing some of the data. If we look at, I guess, the most common types of cancer in females, as you would probably imagine, breast cancer remains, unfortunately, the most common, particularly in the ages of 45 to 55. So it really does highlight the importance that screening has, particularly at that age group, of making sure that we're looking out for that condition. From a men's point of view, under 50, skin and colon cancer tend to be the highest, and over 50 is prostate cancer. Again, in our Insights report, we use an example. In this case, Alan Lamb. Now, you would know him as the ex-cricketer. We know him as a Vitality customer. At the age of 67, he had a blood test and he identified raised PSA. He went for some further tests and some scans, and within the next day was seeing his consultant talking about treatment. 3 months later, his treatment had completed, and now I'm pleased to say that he is passed in flying colours. But again, what that's showing you is the value, and reminds us the value of PMI in ultimately doing the day job, which is looking after people when they really, really need it. So cancer remains a really, really high value and high perceived benefit for very clear reasons. So moving on to the next area, and one I think is significantly important, that relates to the mental health challenge that faces this country. If you look at the NHS, they had over 4 million referrals in 2021. 4 million referrals. I mean, that is a scary stat, if nothing else. And we as insurers, as I'm sure like others, have seen that demand coming through as well. So if you look at the next graph, what you can see there, the overall 3 times increase in access to mental health. But what you can see in particular here is that we're seeing a 5 times increase in talking therapy. In fact, in day and outpatient has hardly moved over the period of time of this graph. So significant growth in talking therapies. And why is that important? It's important because it works. It actually makes a massive difference. So if you look at our data, what we've seen is that around only 1.2% of customers need any further intervention after 3 months of talking therapies. So turning it around, you could argue 99% of customers are seeing excellent outcomes within 3 months of talking therapies. And it's not surprising this area is seeing significant growth, and is an area I think personally we need to continue to encourage our customers to use. Talking about usage, and I guess moving on, 69% females are 69% more likely to use the service than males. And if you look at the age profile, under 40, so it's around about half of females will use that service, and for males it's only 31% are using that service. So clearly more work to be done in terms of males and using the service and promoting it, and something that Steve talked about earlier on. So that really looks at that mental health challenge. So just moving on and thinking about mental health, and there's clearly a correlation between your physical health and your level of physical activity and mental health. And I think the other thing that's really important to explore is physio. And again, similar type of theme, huge growth in demand for physio service. What we've seen, in fact, is a 26% increase just in 1 year of customers that are accessing physio. And how has that been achieved? Well, largely that's been achieved, as I say, through making it more accessible through that digital mechanism, whether it's doing the first triage on a digital basis, or indeed for some customers actually doing the physio session in a digital mechanism, particularly during COVID, when obviously face-to-face was challenging. And what we've seen from our own data is that by speeding up that triage process, we've been able to get customers to a face-to-face physio session 90% of the time within 2 days. In fact, in London, it's closer to 98 within 2 days. So fast access to treatment, which is really, really important. And who uses physio sessions? Well, I'm sure if I asked you, you would probably guess. So males between 25 and 50 are much more likely to use our physio service. Or for males approaching 50 like myself who think they're still 25, are great consumers of the physio service. And if you look at the next graph, what you can see are these areas and the most common areas. So knee is right up there, lower back, shoulder, ankle are the most common areas. And again, if we were playing physio bingo, I'd probably have scored a full house across all of those areas. So physio, really, really important. So now moving on to the next topic I wanted to cover, and that's this concept of directional care, these consultant-led guidelines which a number of insurers have introduced. And these are largely becoming the norm across the industry. And why is that the case? And again, for two reasons. Firstly, digital has made it easier to allow customers to make choices. But I think what's much more significant is the access to quality data. Insurers are able to look at clinical outcomes of consultants in a level of detail that we've never been able to do. So if you take the Premier Consultant panel that we created last year, we've been able to analyse over 200 different data points that allows us to select and build a panel that's based on the quality of the outcome, not how much the consultant chooses to charge. So you're not creating a panel based on tariff, are you in or below the tariff, but based on quality measures. So you're presenting to customers choices based on those consultants that present the best clinical outcomes. And by using that digital mechanism, you're able to show those customers and they can make an informed choice. And in our case, go directly and book into the customers, into the consultant's diary to try and ease that process of getting quick treatment as fast as you possibly can. Now, when we launched our Premier Consultant panel last year, we presented some early data on some of those quality measures that I've just talked about. And now what I can do is share the 2021 data. So if you look at the next graph, what you can see here is that change of consultant is significantly lower. Now that's generally because they see the right consultant first time round. If you look at length of stay, you can see that is 30% lower when they're seeing the Premier consultants. If you look at readmission rates, you can see that they're also significantly lower. But what's important that also the overall spend on these consultants is slightly lower. So ultimately what you're getting is a higher quality experience, but a slightly lower cost. And that explains why these directional care products tend to be slightly lower than, say, a hospital list, because of you're getting the higher quality, but at a slightly lower spend. In fact, so much so that for our customers on a hospital list, we'll actually give them up to £50 cashback if they choose one of our Premier consultants, because we're able to pass some of that saving back on to our customers. And I think what that does is, I guess, neatly brings me back to, Vitality, in particular, our core purpose. For those of us that have seen Vitality present over the number of years that we've been in the marketplace, you'll know that the core purpose is critically important to us. Make people healthy, enhance and protect their lives. This for us is not something that we have as a mission statement that we've tried to retrofit into the business. This is something that drives us as an organisation. If you'd cut us in half, we'd probably bleed those words. It's that important to us. And how do we do it? Well, we deliver it through this concept of shared value. Now, and why is it important? Because frankly, society expects people to, or companies to return more than just profits these days. We need to be doing a social good. And that's why the shared value model is so important. And often people ask me, why is it called shared value? How does that work? What does that mean? And I guess very simply what it means is that we encourage people to make healthy choices. And healthy choices means that it's better for them, obviously, but equally they claim less. And hopefully the data that I've shared with you and the data that's in our report can argue that point to the nth degree. But we can definitely articulate and demonstrate quite clearly that we can achieve better health outcomes. As a result of that, we make slightly more money. We're not shy of that. We make an actuarial surplus. But what do we do with that money? What we do with it is we reinvest into our plan in benefits that we wouldn't otherwise be able to afford. And I'm proud of the things that we've brought to the market. The industry first. So, for example, Vitality GP in 2015 was an industry first. Introducing PEPI into our plan, covering the really important menopausal support for our female customers. The health screening at home that we introduced during the COVID crisis. A list of other benefits that we've introduced. And more recently in the launch that we announced last month, where we've removed exclusions for cover for talking therapies. So all of our customers can access talking therapies regardless of any exclusions they may have on their policy, because we believe access is that important. And hopefully what I've shown you in our data, why it is just so important, because frankly, it works. So it's good for the customer, it's good for us as the insurer, it gives them new benefits. It also allows us to give back to society because, of course, healthier customers means healthier population, which reduces the stress on the NHS. And ultimately for our employers, healthy employees are more productive and reduce absenteeism. So literally everybody benefits. It really is that win-win situation. So I hope you found this session useful and interesting. I thank you very much for your time and attention, and I look forward to taking questions.
Carl, thank you very much for coming in and sharing those insights for us. I mean, there's plenty to take away from the data you've just shared there with us. Yep. And we've got a couple of minutes for a few quick questions. But first, I wanted to ask you, you've mentioned some of Vitality's enhancements to its propositions. Yep. Are you able to give us a bit further insight into when some more might be coming down the line?
So, as you know, we closely guard all of our secrets in terms of our future development. Yes, we have got some more developments that are coming on down the line. One of them, Steve talked a little bit about what we are absolutely focused on, that full end-to-end integration of customers. So starting from the Vitality GP and allowing them to go all the way through to complete their authorisation, to select their consultant, to book their appointment, all completely digitally. Mm-hmm. That's something that I guess is not a product proposition, but is very much part of our story. I think there are other areas that we're looking at. The Insights report has really allowed us to understand where we think there's some gaps in customer expectations, and you will see us make further changes to our proposition to continually make sure that if we're not at least meeting customers' expectations, ideally we should be exceeding them.
And there was something in that mental health data there that was quite interesting around in outpatient care. Now that's been flat for years. Yeah. So does it still have a future really? Do you see that this is something that's still going to be part of this, in a couple of years' time, for example?
Yeah, look, there's always going to be a place for in and outpatient care. It serves an important purpose, and I think clearly it needs to remain there. But if you imagine the treatment triangle, this is right at the top. It's a very small percentage of customers, luckily, that have to go there. From our point of view, we would like to try and do everything we can to try and avoid that. So that early intervention, either through preventative activity or by as soon as the customer spots that there is possibly some issues in terms of mental health, let's get in there quickly. Let's make sure that we get those talking therapies started quickly and avoid that. But I think in answer to your question, I think it's always going to remain as a service and support. Mm-hmm.
And very, very quickly, we'll just do one more question, which is around those consultant-led pathways you've talked about. Yeah. It's a kind of split opinion on some of this stuff sometimes. Would you consider them a downgrade of sorts?
Yeah. Look, personally, I struggle with this as a concept. Ironically here, when we explained it to customers, they actually think the price is going to be higher because what we're saying to them is that we're restricting your list of consultants, but only to the most highest quality consultants. So they think it should cost more. They find it a bit odd when we tell them that it actually costs less. So I think it's in the positioning. I think that's important. But I think it's also important to make the point, but there are some customers that will always prefer to choose their own consultant. And for that, hospital lists will always exist. But for the majority of customers who don't know any consultants, they're actually quite like the idea of being able to make an informed decision based on data.
Carl, well, thank you very much for coming in and sharing those insights with us this morning.
Thank you.
Okay.